friends. Welcome to Keto Friendly Recipes with Jennifer Marie and Dr. Boz. Tonight we are talking vitamin D. We've got a lot of topics that we've been talking about, so there's probably going to be a big mixture of things coming in. And out to her page and working on a couple of things, but I got to remind you, I have done a horrible job in explaining to you a money-saving opportunity. So for those of you who are wanting a really good cookbook, let me tell you, keto-friendly recipes, easy keto for busy people. You will want to get this book, and you'll want to do it this week. The reason is it comes out May the 7th. And this is the part where I did a horrible job in explaining to you why you want to get it sooner. I have almost $300 worth of stuff that you get free when you pre-order this book. So the book is only a little over $15 right now on Amazon. So one of the biggest things that I really like that you get free is this printable of 3 months worth of meal plans. 3 months. It's got shopping lists. It's got recipes and the plans in there. That alone, I sell on the site for $29.99. Plus, you're going to get the printable of the journal, the inspirational journal. And then there's probably 10 other things that you get. But those are the major things that you get. So you're going to order the book, get it for only $15 and get all this extra stuff. Sorry, I did a horrible job in explaining that. And I don't want you to miss it because there's literally only a week left before you can get all of the freebies that come with the pre-order. So hello, everybody. Hello, Dr. Boz. How are you?
Hello, I am great. Well, I've had a heck of a 3 weeks, but I'm good. I'm going to be better. You know, we've had a funeral in the family, and I had my last non-teenager. He's not I've got teenagers for real, like 13, 15, 17, 19, or 18. Gosh, not 19 yet. But I have no more 12-year-olds is what I'm trying to say. On Easter, my youngest turned 13. And so in the midst of dealing with a really tragic, just a heavy funeral, you know, there's some funerals that are lighter, and this one was just heavy. And so he's grieving. We're grieving about that while trying to give him a birthday that was good for him, but just distracting. You know, Easter was, you know, a time to, you know, definitely use your faith to get through something that difficult and be reflective.
Well, I'm terribly sorry for your loss. I knew that that's what was happening, and I haven't talked to you for a while because it's tough. It's tough dealing with that.
Like the world is slowly moving. It's just so slow. I cannot believe it's only been a week. And I look back and I haven't written a chapter in my book. I had patient charts backed up for like the last 10 days. I pushed out appointments for another 2 weeks, and I'm like, oh, so Sunday nights are the fun times. Yeah. I'm glad we're here. This is easy.
Well, I love our chats because I love talking to you. We talk often. So it's always a pleasure to talk to you. But you know what? I have to share something real quick. I got an actual handwritten letter. You know how rare that is to get a handwritten letter? This is from somebody who follows this page. And her name is Chris. I'm just going to say B from her last name. She sent me a handwritten letter, but look at this. Look at this. You know what she mentions in here? She mentions in here, well, first of all, she loves the recipes and she loves the videos with you, Dr. Boz. She says she's she's been helped by the weekly meal plans, which I'm glad to help her. But this made me cry. This literally made me cry. I was sitting in the parking lot at the post office, opening this up, and I was bawling. She says in her last sentence, "This is the first time in 28 years that I am physically pain-free." Oh my God. First of all, I can't even imagine somebody being in pain for 28 years. But the fact that, you know, I never wanted to do video. I never wanted to do any of this, but this right here, I can put all of my video fear aside and all of, you know, the judgments aside and whatever I face that I don't do very well, and just do this for Chris, because she is, oh my God, like, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful?
It is, that how do you truly and genuinely uh, reach a hand out and walk with somebody through a difficult phase, and you don't know their name, you don't know that they're watching, you don't, sometimes you and I, I've said this, I'm like, does anybody get anything? Did I make sense? Did I connect with the audience? Because the body language is missing. I don't have any feedback except in the written form, which is, in our case, is usually I get to see it afterwards. And to have moments like that where you say, just trust that if you're doing this for the right reasons, your genuine spirit of helping people will come through, and the fad of other adventures will fade. But when you've got a genuine improvement of life, first of all, it's energizing for us. Like I truly mean, this is one of my favorite parts of the week, because it's very, it's the right emotion that connects with these videos. But yeah, makes it all worth it.
Yeah. It's real, and it's handwritten. Like I don't know about you, but anybody who writes I love handwritten, and I love to still talk on the phone because I like that connection with people, but this means so much. I cannot even tell you. I get messages, and messages mean a lot, and all connections mean a lot, but the fact that she's 20, pain-free, 28.
I can't put my head around that. That's amazing. Yeah. That handwritten stuff is a really big deal. And, they don't teach that cursive writing, handwritten, yes, but cursive writing in school. There's a few rules in my family. Tomorrow is the best day of the year. It comes twice a year. And that is, it's piano recital day. And it'll be my son's last piano recital. So there's two things that you need to get food in my house. If you're my child, you need to play the piano as long as you live with me. And then I don't care if you ever touch it again, your brain will be wired to think differently if you play the piano. And you have to write in cursive. I don't care if your teacher doesn't like it, you have to write in cursive. And I will be your mother, and I will teach you, and I will help you, and I will correct the syntax of your handwritten letter or handwriting, because it really is that string of letters. This is like I'm kind of geeking out, but the string of letters when written is therapy. You've seen me talk about the left-handed loops, but you look at some of the most meditative moments, and this is through functional MRIs. You can see this, where they're writing a string of letters together. That cursive writing is meditative. And so it wakes up the person on the other side, though. As you write that handwritten letter, it connects to you as if they're there. That is a much deeper connection. So I totally get it. Oh, it would strike emotion to me too.
Oh, I was bawling like a baby, just bawling. I was so happy for her. I was so happy that she found keto any way she found it. I'm so happy because I've had little pains, nothing like 28 years. I can't even wrap my head around it. So as we are talking about that, we're going to lead into vitamin D. And
so as you know, we've done several things with Jennifer's health. Jennifer is my patient. We're in a doctor-patient relationship, and she has allowed you to bear witness to this doctor-patient relationship through these Sunday night videos. And one of the things we've looked at is we've checked labs along the way. We do this because I want to know, because she wants to know, but it also is we can have a lot of theories about the ketogenic diet, but it's an amazing testimony, and it really does reinforce some of these difficult choices of giving up different foods when you've got labs sitting next to you saying, look what you've done, look what we've come through. But in that same respects, it also gives us a warning. When we check some of the screening labs like vitamin D, we know that you're about to embark on a fat-based diet. One of the fats that are vitamins is vitamin D. You've got D, E, A, and K, but the vitamin D is... I can remember when the assay to look at it, the lab assay, became readily available. It had gone from research into clinical practice. And man, we looked at it and we could find that it was like in the 20s, in the teens in some of my patients. And of course, I would hang out around the mental health literature, or the Parkinson's, or broken brains. Think of broken brains, bipolar, sleep disorders. And I could not believe how much of the literature linked to when the vitamin D was low. There's a couple things. If your brain is in a funk and you are stuck, yes, a ketogenic diet is going to help. There's going to be less inflammation, but there's some other things that are really important for repairing a brain that's in a funk. One of them is vitamin D. The other one is iron. But vitamin D, again, this fat-based nutrient, we know that it gets better on a ketogenic diet, but it can take a long time. You know, you look at people in a funk. I had a guest stay with us this past week who is not from South Dakota. He did not wake up with snow yesterday on the end of April. He gets plenty of sun, but he's had times where he says, you know, that flow of getting really heavy work done, I know that I was having a tough time. I went to my doctor and my vitamin D was low. And he's like, you think the ketogenic diet would help that? I'm like, yeah, but remember back to the time when your brain was not working well. And then your doctor says, hey, take your carbs down, go through a keto flu, be really disciplined because you're going to have temptation everywhere around you at the beginning. You're not going to feel great for a couple of weeks. And, oh, did you say that you're here because your brain's not working? Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, no, it's not going to work for that patient. You know, you look at vitamin D as something that will improve over the next year if they go on a ketogenic diet. But, you know, I took some notes because I wanted to make sure that I had this list in front of me of things that are linked to a low vitamin D. Because I get all excited about the mental health stuff, like the depression, the poor sleep, the poor concentration. But here's some other studies that I think are really important. First of all, colon cancer is linked to a low vitamin D. Breast cancer is linked to a low vitamin D. Prostate cancer, a low vitamin D. Type 1 and type 2 diabetes linked to low vitamin D. So are a lot of the autoimmune things like your asthma, your Crohn's disease. So that's the inflammatory bowel disease. I wrote these down. Thyroid, multiple sclerosis was another one. That's another big brain one that's very inflammatory. And it's the body is attacking itself. So, you know, you look at the list is even longer. You've got obesity directly linked to vitamin D, influenza or long-term infections like tuberculosis, infections in general, all linked to a low vitamin D. And so you look at this.
So
go ahead.
So let me ask you, how does somebody know or what are the symptoms of vitamin D? I know, but I'm going to ask because I know that there are a lot of people in the audience who want me to ask this question. Mm-hmm. So what are the symptoms of low vitamin D? If you feel this, you may have low vitamin D.
Oh, that's a dirty trap. The sad part is vitamin D is so insidious. As it gets lower, life just gets in a funk. And I'll tell you, people will blame and they'll say all these other things. I have depression. It's because of the weather. It's because my thyroid. It's because of my weight. And I'm lurking in the background saying, I bet it's a nutrient deficiency that you're not going to see everything wake up tomorrow if I would just infuse you with vitamin D. Your body has to learn to function again with a high level of vitamin D. And it's kind of like the reverse. As it slows down the function because the vitamin D gets lower, little things get worse. I think of it as like mental energy is my way to summarize. What makes me think to order a vitamin D? We do annually, like just say, oh, you should probably, we live in the north. We live above that that latitude that says everybody should be screened for vitamin D. We should supplement in our dark months of the year. But what makes me think of it is anything with mental health. Like I just can't seem to concentrate. I'm more irritable. Something's changed. I don't sleep as well. It links to things like osteoporosis and obesity and type 2 diabetes. But think of all the other symptoms the patient has when they're struggling with those things. That's like the least of their issues. Like, no, you're long gone from there. Like there are so many other symptoms that get hidden that if I just say, hey, your vitamin D, if I replace this. Now, the sad part is I still would have to undo the type 2 diabetes. I would still have to undo the obesity. I would have to undo the blood pressure because they're linked to these other problems. And the symptomatology is this kind of wispy collection of symptoms. So it's not like a thyroid disorder where you can say, hey, your heart rate's going to be lower, your weight's going to come on faster. It's kind of like a metabolism or throttle is going down. With vitamin D, it's even more insidious than that. It's very sneaky. And it's like they wake up 3 years later and say, what do you mean my vitamin D is 24? And you're like, oh no.
Doesn't it take a while it just drops off? Doesn't it like take a while to become low and like a long time? And this conversation is coming up because I just found out my daughter's low in vitamin D, like really low. Like she's been having some issues lately that caused me to get this test for her. So when it's really low, it's taken time, right?
Right. That's not yesterday. That's the whole point I'm saying, is that you don't get low. People say, oh, I took my vitamin D yesterday. I'm like, oh, your body will thank you in several months, because
Yeah.
you'll absorb it, and then it goes into your body and it starts doing what vitamin D does, which is it connects to several of the other, like it's an augmenter of reactions, if you would. Like coenzyme isn't quite the right word, but it's more like a facilitator of reactions. And when I look at, I'll tell you a good story. When I checked my dad's vitamin D, my dad is 75 years old, and he is a stubborn old farmer who's got chicken white legs. And I tell you that because his legs have never seen sun. Like, he's a farmer. Your legs are not supposed to see sun. That's just the rules. And if you've ever seen him in shorts, like prior to a year and a half ago, I think I could have counted on one hand how many times I've ever seen his knees, because he just always wears pants. Like, okay, whatever, Dad. But his vitamin D is also regulated by your kidney. And I might have shared on this show before that he's down to 17% of his kidney function. Now, you go on dialysis at 16%, and my dad will refuse dialysis, so he will die. So we've been preparing for this. He used to be 220 pounds, and nobody in his South Dakota world of influence would have said you're overweight. He went on a ketogenic diet when Mom did, but he wasn't nearly as strict. And then his kidneys kind of went to the pooper, and he's now down to 160 pounds. Because I said, wow, Dad, you have enough kidney cells to clean 160 pounds of flesh. And if you're above that, your kidneys are not going to work. They're still not working great, and we have to use a lot of tricks to get them to work. But one of the other problems is that as his kidneys get worse, his vitamin D level gets worse. And then he got crabby, and he got grouchy, and he got to be a stubborn old man, like that Grumpy Old Man group movie. He could have starred in it. He was so crabby. And I was giving him major doses. His doctor, both 10,000 units of, 50,000 units every 3 times a week for 4 months. And we raised it just a little bit. And you're like, okay, there has to be a better way to do this. So, which brings me back to, your daughter lives in Texas. So she had a very low vitamin D, and we're just going to talk that for every 10 points below 50, we have a problem. So 50 is magical. 50 is where I want mine. That's where I want anybody who's struggling with brain problems. 50 is kind of like the ferritin, which is the other iron thing for brains, where I remember both of those need to be 50. And if we have that, I can have a strong confidence that it is not getting in the way of how to help the patient get better. So every tick down by 1 point under 50 gets you a little bit of problems, but every tick down by 10 decreases the way the brain functions. We're talking IQ. We're talking ability to solve a problem. Like, they could solve the puzzle, and then they couldn't do it when their vitamin D got too low. And you're like, are you kidding? It changes that much of the brain function? I'm like, yes, it is a huge mental health ability to like persevere through a tough, like the funeral I went through this week. Man, we should all infused with vitamin D, because it wouldn't have fixed us that fast. But the vitamin D every 10 points down is a major drop in mental function. So to say, okay, if you're in your 40s, okay, not great, get it up to 50. If you're in your 30s, you are sacrificing some of that resource for your brain to work as optimally. When you get down into your 20s, and I was a big part of the shelters here in my state, and I had some vitamin Ds in the teens, and I'm like, it's like their brain slowed so much, you worried that it was like a genetic issue that they were, because I'm just meeting them for the first time, like, wow. And then you watch to say, well, how do I get them better? And number one, remember when you first went on a ketogenic diet, and we talked about this really gross part of the ketogenic diet where you would have oil slick in the toilet because you put so much fat in it first, you're like, your bowels didn't know what to do. Well, now you're 2 years later, and yours doesn't do that. Your body says, no, I put fat in and then I absorb it. Okay. Yeah. Your bowels got used to that. Well, when you give vitamin D, this fat soluble vitamin, to most of my low fat patients, they were pooping out most of it. They couldn't absorb it. Like, they didn't see the pill in the toilet, but they definitely were not getting it into their system. I mean, when you go on a ketogenic diet, you practice absorbing fat. You get more efficient at it. So now if I give you some vitamin D orally, at least they're going to be able to absorb it. But
so we have we have lots of people asking, so what brand of vitamin D? Is it D3? Do you take it with K2? Like there's so many questions.
K2 is a whole nother topic too. So K2 is very important. Like in my dad, I'm going to tell you what I did, because you're asking which brand of vitamin D. And I would tell you, I wouldn't use that as your primary way to get vitamin D. So let me tell you about my dad. So I spend the better part. I am good at my job. You're never going to find, you don't have to read a few pages in my book to see how passionate I am about answering my own parents' puzzles of medical health issues. So here's my dad with a vitamin D at 19, at 21, and I have been dosing him. I have been giving him as much as I can find, make him take, but he clearly can't absorb it. And of course, the doctor thinks he's not compliant, but he's doing what he's told, even though he's grouchy about it. And finally I said, okay, we are going to do this naturally. We are going to put you in the sun. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yep, you have a tanning bed in your little
with that much of a deficiency, did you put him in the sun naked?
Yes, exactly. I totally did. This is what you're going to love it. That's what I did. So here is this. He lives in a town of 800 people. Okay. 800 people. It's like a big family. Right. And so I called a little gal who's got a hairdress shop and she has a tanning bed uptown. And I said, I asked her, she remembers me from high school. This is, she knows me. Oh, how you doing? And she's talking away. And I said, I need you to help me. And she goes, I need to know if your tanning bed has UVB, as in boy, UVB rays in the light bulbs. And she's like, oh, Annie, I would not know that. I'd have to call them. And I said, well, I need you to do that because my dad needs to have an increase in his vitamin D. And I have exhausted his gut to be able to absorb more vitamin D. He wasn't healthy enough to absorb it. And we are going to hack his system. So the way we did this was she called the manufacturer. She had to get in into the manual, and she called and said, now, are these UVB or UVA rays? And she says, hot diggity, they're the good ones. We have UV. So I'm like, all right, Dad, I need you to buy 100 minutes at the tanning bed. And the key is to not burn. So the first time you're going to go, you're going to get down to your birthday suit. You're going to lay in that tanning bed for 4 minutes. Oh my goodness. Did I tell you he's 75? He's like, I went up to the tanning bed. It took me 40 minutes to get all my clothes on and then off. And I was only laying in the dang thing for 4 minutes. And I'm like, good job, Dad. The prescription says 3 times a week. What? And I'm like, yep. Dad, we have done everything else. You have to fix this. Your kidneys need vitamin D. Your body needs vitamin D. And your marriage, because you're awful crabby, needs some vitamin D. So, so he did it. And, again, we started with 4 minutes because the goal is to not burn. You don't want to burn, but you are going to tan. The UVB rays are what you need. And here in South Dakota, you only get really effective UVB rays in any part of the country, any part of the world, from 10 to 2. So it is a certain ray that comes down much better from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And go ahead.
So, and speaking of which, our children, mine is low in vitamin D, and she's in school from 10 to 2. She's in a box with no sun.
Right.
So Dina Marie is saying, aren't tanning beds bad though?
I know. You know how many public service announcements I've made about tanning beds that I had to okay, how can I possibly swallow my pride and say, no, wait a minute. When it comes to vitamin D, this is not a bad plan. And here's the saddest part is that the tanning beds, the industry is not allowed to advertise about low vitamin D. So the only place you're going to hear about it is from somebody who is a health advisor. So a physician, okay, or somebody like that. So they cannot put out promotion, come to our tanning beds to get vitamin D. That's illegal. That's giving advice or something. I don't know. Or some must be a lawsuit, but every tanning bed knows about it. Because after a while, the lady called me saying, now I didn't give you advice about tanning bed and I can't advertise about me. I'm like, I know, Bart, you're fine. I will not out you. But my dad's going to come in for 4 minutes 3 times a week, and it's going to take him longer to undress than he'll be in there. And then he graduated up because his, he started getting a little bit of tan. And he had this fear too. Like, I mean, I was the mother that bought the swimming suits that started at the wrist and they went to the ankles. My kids still give me a hard time. Like, I cannot believe you did that. I'm like, I was protecting you against skin cancer. And I'm like, but I was totally denying you vitamin D. So
speaking of which, you mentioned just a minute ago that you don't want to burn.
Right.
Now, John took my daughter to the lake this weekend and they went just the two of them. And it's hot in here in Texas. It's like 80 degrees. They have their swimsuits on. She is burnt to a crisp, like burnt.
So here's the good news. It's the accumulation of the times this happens. So you're going to try not to do that. But the second thing that happens when you do burn, you are going to upregulate melanin a lot faster. So your body, it's an inflammatory reaction, right? It's like, it's a burn, right? And your system is going to say, hey, we need to protect. We need to make some melanin. And so as much as that isn't fun and you'll get through this, do not let her become fearful of the sun. The burning isn't what we want. That's not safe. That does increase your risk of cancer. But to have exposure to the sun, here's the other things that I had to do a bunch of reading. You can't get UVB rays through glass. So when they perfected glass, they were saying we don't want the shades to the sun to come in and take the color out of our carpet or our drapes so we're going to block the UVB rays because that's what would take the color out. So the UVA rays can come in. That's the one that causes cancer. UVB rays don't get to come in. So I used to think, well, I'm driving the car in South Dakota. I'll get a tan, I'll get some, sunlight through. No, it doesn't work. My windshield has got UVB protection. So the other thing is that sunscreen prevents UVB rays. So it prevents. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you don't want sunscreen. So, oh my gosh. So
here's the deal. You don't want to burn. So you just need a dose of vitamin D. You don't need 5 hours of it. Now, when they're low, you think you want 5 hours of it. But I'm telling you, Grandpa Rich. So here's what his story was. I mean, he was in the teens. He was 19. And the doctor prescribed the 50,000 units again. And I told him, Dad, don't take that. We are going to do a tanning bed only. I want to see what happens to your vitamin D we got 4 months to check it. So that just happened. He just had his vitamin D checked. Guess what his number? So let me tell you what he graduated from 4 minutes. He got up to 7 minutes and then he got up to 10 minutes and he goes 10 minutes once a week. And he goes in and he talks to the little ladies and he gets naked and he goes in his tanning bed and comes out. And it's the strangest thing ever because he's like the only dude, right? And he's this old farmer. So he does I had to sell a lot of social capital to get him to go. And but what has happened over the last 4 months is he's totally less crabby. He is better at his ketogenic diet because I think the mood. So I kind of was hoping that he'd be like somewhere in the 30s or 40s by the time we went in 4 months. And he came back at 54. His doctor said the words, well, you might be getting toxic from the pill. And he looks across the room at me and I'm like, don't say anything. Shh. You've been taking this. Stop. Because the doctor would hardly believe that he's been taking just a tanning bed to get his vitamin D up. And again, he's got troubles. I mean, he's a lean farmer, but he's had high blood pressure forever. And the ketogenic diet has really helped him. I mean, that's how he got all the weight off. But his vitamin D, he's been struggling. And he's not, you look at the list of other things on there, the infections, the bone disease, the high blood pressure, that correlation of, we can say that you can protect your system from that if your vitamin D is high enough. Like when you're in your 20s, the only thing you're protecting from is rickets, which is like the test question you got in the 6th grade saying, what happens if you don't have any vitamin D? And you're like, rickets, the multiple choice connected out, ricket. Well, that's ridiculous. Rickets, it's 2019, people. No way are we thinking about rickets. We know that if you get a vitamin D above 50, you can prevent breast cancer. You have an 83% reduction in breast cancer with a vitamin D above 50. What?
So Peggy says, I have hypermelanin and adrenal insufficiency and very low vitamin D. I can't see to absorb the D, would hypermelanin keep me from getting D from the sun?
Nope. So the melanin protects the DNA. It's actually a really interesting process. So hypermelanin, that's a dark brown skin. Okay. So people sometimes have hypermelanin patches, and you can see those in pregnancy come up. But if your race is Black, you'll have more melanin. If you've got Native American, you're more melanin. So the melanin actually is the density of the substance that places a shadow between the sun and the DNA. Let me say that again. So you have a cell, and then you have the source of the sun, and the melanin will migrate to be between you and the sun. So as the sun,
it's like moves, a filter.
Yes, and it moves like a filter. With the sun. Yes, and it will protect the DNA. So when you are butt white, like my family, we don't have much melanin without trying. And that's why we will burn so quickly. But once you burn, you activate the production of melanin, which makes you tan. And that will, again, keep you protected. It will protect or shadow over the DNA to protect it from the free radicals that come in from the sun. So
that is so interesting. Mm-hmm. So interesting. So in my case, I hear you saying that I should go take my daughter to a tanning bed, of course, after she recovers from the burn at the lake, and probably for about 3 times a week, starting off 4 minutes each until you eventually graduate at some point. What determines a graduation?
Yeah, vitamin D of 50. So once you get it restored, again, it's a lot easier to keep it there. The key to getting him there, I was so impressed we got that high. I've been trying for nearly 6 years to get his vitamin.
Wow.
30, let alone 54.
Wow.
I'm like, hot diggity, that is awesome. That is so great. And I just can't believe I didn't think of it. Like, I mean,
you know what? I would bet they're finding more and more people are deficient in some form of vitamin D today. Wouldn't you say that's true?
Well, you know what I like about this study that looks at is we look at vitamin D and it's linked to all these health issues, but we also look at so this is a fat-based molecule. When you have fat restored and circulating in your system, kind of pumping through your veins, there is something healthier about that. Let me back up a second. One of the reasons you hear the cholesterol process, the cholesterol fight in ketogenic diet, like, oh, you're going to raise your cholesterol. And there's some of us that are saying, that's not all bad. We need cholesterol to repair. We need cholesterol to make cells. It is a core part of our body. And we have this puzzle that says total cholesterol has never been proven to be linked to a heart attack. In fact, your total cholesterol has been linked to an improved health outcome. I mean, like they died less in the study if their total cholesterol is higher. So they call it's called all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality means I don't know what's up with them, but they lived longer. And when the total cholesterol was higher, you could find all-cause mortality. If you looked at the studies and you really were careful about selecting out certain, this gets a little detailed and I'm trying not to lose the audience here, but there is something protective about cholesterol, about fat. And so when you study this, the look of vitamin D and say, when it gets above 20, we know you're not going to have rickets. There's a couple of things. I'm going to make sure I say them right. When you get above 20, when you get above 30, we know that in men, they have less heart attacks. That's your vitamin D. We know that if you get to, that you have less falls in women if your vitamin D was above 30. If you had a vitamin D above 52, you had 83% less breast cancer. That's crazy.
Wow.
So this fat molecule.
Wow.
There's something about when you replace fatty molecules and an improvement in health. This link is real. And I've had some lecturers educate in a way that was much, that connected the dots. And then they all want to run and hide because it is so unpopular to talk about how eating fat is going to make you healthier. Well, you know, we're clear out there on the limb. We're standing fully in shoes up to our knees in fat that we think. But vitamin D is linked to an improvement in vitamin D when you're on the ketogenic diet because of the nutrient dense foods they're eating. It's just going to take a long time. And if you've got people struggling with it, well, I put my dad in a tanning bed. That tells you what I would do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. I think I might just get tanning bed going for my little one, my younger one.
Yeah.
So,
a couple people offer to say, you could start one. I said, I don't think I'm brave enough to start it. I spent so much of my years telling the world how bad tanning beds were that I just don't think I can possibly own one.
Right. I bet you could own a salt spa though. Wouldn't that be cool?
I totally own one of those. Those are great.
Yeah, totally. So what do you say about like the risks of so the first thing would be to try and get it from the sun, but you want to use sunscreen. Would you use sunscreen actually, or would you not?
So here's the deal. You have to help her because she's going to have to learn how to do this. Exposure to the sun without sunscreen is how you get your vitamin D. So the first half an hour, you need to not have sunscreen on. And then you got to put the sunscreen on. If you're going to go to the lake, if you're going to be outside, we don't want you to burn. Sunscreen is amazing. It will protect you. But
and then
yeah,
and here in Texas is powerful, especially when you're on the water, because I want to say they were probably out on the dock for an hour and she had sunscreen on, but he missed he helped her put it on and then she changed her swimsuit or something, so she missed just a certain part. So it's like really, really red at a certain part and then not, and then so
So here's what I did with my kids. I had one kid that was allergic to the sunscreen. He would get all red from it. So there's this company called Coolibar, Coolibar, and they make a material that protects UVB and UVA rays, but it's also waterproof. And so I think every time I did a mission trip to Haiti, I just wore one of these. They were long sleeves and they were kind of the quarter zip. And it looks like you're wearing like a turtleneck in the sun, but they're so breathable that it was awesome.
I think I know what you're talking about with those Cooler bras. They look like a shirt, but it's something that you wear in the sun, and yet it looks like you're wearing a long sleeve shirt, doesn't it?
And they're great. You get them wet, they dry in a few minutes. I remember wearing them to Haiti whenever we were on a mission trip, and I would just have a different color for every 2 or 3 days. And they were awesome because they didn't hold in any heat. But I mean, I'd probably be about as good as your daughter at putting on sunscreen that often, because you do need to redose it and all that. And especially if you've got sensitive skin, you want to have exposure to it, but have exposure, then put the shawl or the cover up on. Just easier if you ask me. That's how I got my kids into from ankle to wrist.
So let me ask the audience, how many people here know their vitamin D level, or maybe have even inquired about it in the last 3 months? Yeah, like I want to know, because in fact, I just looked at mine. I got some test results back. These test results cost me $750. It's test results that the doctors won't order. But I just had my daughter's test done and she has a level 25. That's low.
That is really
And she was even, when you mentioned the symptoms of like slow brain, she's like, Mom, I don't know what happened, but I'm losing short-term stuff. I can't think, I can't concentrate. And this is what caused us to start looking at all these levels. It's like, wait, what's happening? And
that part is you have a teenager, their brains are super resilient. So she was coping, she was compensating, she was working harder or trying harder as that deficiency happened. But you get it below 20. I mean, you get it in the 20s. You have a serious impact on a growing brain. And if I was her mom too, I'd be finding any way to get that up. So you can supplement it. It's not that it doesn't work. It's that the fat, sometimes when you give them a fat-based chemical, if they're not keto adapted, if they're not been having high fat, sometimes they don't absorb it very well. And so I've had some celiac patients, or had some, inflammatory bowel patients where their gut was just too swollen to absorb what I needed them to absorb. And there is a shot, but that's even more. I would stick with sun and recheck it, and give it 4 months to recheck it though, because you'll get a lot of noise. And if you check it too close together, the assay on it, meaning, is really good, but it's not perfect. So if you get it, it's 24, and then you check it 2 weeks later and it's 22, and you're like, oh my goodness, it went down. You're like, no, that's noise. Don't look that close. You give it time to raise, give it 4 months. And some might even say 6 months.
Yeah. So I'm supplementing her. I'm giving her vitamin D3, and she's not really good at taking it every day. So I do like we have a 5,000 pill. And I think I give it to her every couple of days because her doctor said to give her 2,000 daily, I think he said. So 2,000
to go at 2,000 micrograms per day. It would take a long time to get a 24 back to a 50. And that's a good 9 months. Yeah. So I would find a tanning bed too, or something. I would find another way.
Oh, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
We're gonna sign up for some minutes. We're gonna start off with 4 minutes 3 times a week. How do you know when you graduate to the next 7 minute mark?
All you're looking at is to not burn. So as your melanin goes up, you're like, yeah, I've gone in a few times. I didn't get burned. Like at 4 minutes, they're pretty intense. And that's all kinds of like your birthday suit. So that you have parts of the skin that, you want the skin exposed. That's why the dose is naked is the highest dose. Tanning bed's going to get you there. So that being said, though, 4 minutes and you can be pretty tender. So then say, okay, 4 minutes was enough. She didn't get burned. Now you can do another 4 minutes. Then you get like 3 or 4 of those under your belt, go up to 6 minutes or something. And what you're trying to do is just graduate them to a place where they don't burn.
Yeah. So do I have to worry about K2?
K2 is another really important one. I did a lot of reading about this, and you could write a whole book on it. It's really unbelievable how little I knew about this. And again, I think of vitamin K and I think of clotting factors and all Coumadin patients and warfarin and, my atrial fib patient. Okay. I had no idea that there was a subset of a vitamin called K2 it really is this manager of calcium, essentially. And when it gets low, again, it's a fat soluble vitamin. So when it gets low, your calcium doesn't quite know where to go. So my dad, if you took an x-ray of him, you could see on the x-ray, his calcified arteries in his heart.
Wow.
That is not an accident that his vitamin D was that low and that his calcium has been going in the wrong places. So even though I told him not to take the 5,000 or 50,000 units from the doctor, I did tell him to not quit taking the D3 K2 every day, even while we did the tanning bed. He's been on that for like 6 months though. So they were going to put 50,000 units in addition to what he was taking and do that a couple times a week. And I said, just keep taking the K2 D3. And there's several of them out there that you can look at. I tried like anything. I try to say, oh, isn't there a great food that you could get this from? And there's something that's like soy-based fermented that all you have to do, I can't remember the name of it right now, but I Googled or I looked at a couple of YouTube videos of people tasting it. And I have a strong stomach. I do not get nauseous. But even me watching like 3 or 4 of those people try to eat that, you're like, oh, not going to try that. And you can find K2 in fermented foods like sauerkraut. I'm a big kombucha fan. And so you can find it in kombucha, but it's really low. I mean, it's not great. I still would recommend supplementing that one. So there's a few things that get supplemented in my house. K2 D3 is one of them. And yeah, ketones.
Well, yeah, no kidding. I wished all these vitamins came from really just good food, and I wish we could supplement it with just good food. I made an amazing Big Mac cheeseburger salad. We love this salad. It's one of the salads that's so hearty, so tasteful, guilt-free, keto. And when I make it, it's like, usually my family doesn't like salads. It's like, salad. But if you give them this one that I've made, they're like, is there more? Is there more? And I'm like,
is that one in your book?
No, actually. And there's a lot of people that have been asking me, I come out with new recipes all the time. I'm always stretching the limits in the kitchen. I'm always taking my grandma's old recipes and trying to ketofy them. So no, there's 125 recipes in the book, but I make so many more recipes. Actually, if you want to get on my recipe list, I send them out every week. for free. Just put your email on my list. It's under switch2keto.com, and you can get, I send out all the recipes for free. So just get on my list. I'll send them to you. But cheeseburger salad, it's one that we've made often, but we don't make it in the winter. So now that it's like hot in summer, I'm making salads again. And they're like, oh my God, it's Big Mac cheeseburger salad. But the dressing on this is so good. Like, really? So good. Oh yeah.
Well, so yeah. I need to share something with you. I got your book. I got one of the free or the early ones. Although I haven't a copy ordered, I got a copy of your book, and I have this foreign exchange student who's in my house, and she doesn't know how to cook. She says her mother doesn't know how to cook. And so part of my goal as her mother for the year is to teach her how to cook. So eggs became life-saving unit number 1. And then your book came. So she's been practicing eggs. She's doing a good job in eggs. She's actually made a few things. You're like, okay, I think if you left my house, you could actually survive. But I said, anything in this book you can make me. And so we actually made the really super simple, but really good idea to make the cheese based crackers, where it's the piece of cheese.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like, how simple is that? That's what a brilliant idea. I would have never thought of that. And oh my gosh, they were gone before they even cooled. I'm like, okay, we gotta do a bigger batch next time.
So yeah, next time make some guacamole with that and have it.
That would have been awesome. That would have been so good.
Yeah, that's what we do. We not on fasting days, no, but we do that on game nights. We take those simple keto chips. We put some jalapenos on there. We bake them. We mix up some guacamole, and it's just amazing. It's good stuff.
Well, it was a hit, man. It was a hit. So
good.
We have one more food she can cook now.
I love that. I love that. So, yeah, I'm trying to think. We had a few other things we were going to talk about, but that's right. So I went and got some very specialized testing done. It's a micronutrient panel. Why my doctor, I shouldn't say my doctor would order anything I asked for. I love my doctor. Not you, but my primary care. He would order anything I asked for, but you're always at a fight with your insurance on what they will pay for or what you have a diagnosis for them to check for. So I wanted a micronutrient panel. You had asked me months ago, what's your something C-reactive? Yes. Yeah, you asked me all these, and I'm like, I don't know. And I spent $750 to get this test. Like,
in 2 months.
Yeah, it took 2 months to get it
shocking
because they were behind or something. So yeah, let's talk about the HSCRP.
Okay, this is actually one of my favorite tests. So when people come to me and they say, Doc, do I have a risk of a heart attack? The first thing I do is I grab a measuring tool, and I check their waistline. And they're like, no, I want some blood tests to know if I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm like, okay, we can do those too. The predictors of heart disease are related to inflammation. And especially if you've seen someone, the widowmaker, the funeral that's too young, the 45-year-old that drops dead and got children at home, you'll see all of his buddies come into the clinic saying, am I at risk? Am I at risk? It is the first today. If you came into my clinic today, I would be having you say, I'm not going to order a single blood test until you show me that you can check your finger and give me glucoses and ketones in the morning, because the Dr. Boz ratio gives you daily feedback saying, are you getting better or not? And it is so much more powerful than this $700 versus of labs that now is 2 months since you poked your finger. And now we have to make a decision. And then we're going to have to negotiate whether or not I'll get you to do that again, because it's so expensive, right?
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean you don't do it. C-reactive, highly sensitive C-reactive protein is one of my top 5. I do this in every one of my patients. I do it above doing a cholesterol panel. If I have to choose, I'll do a hemoglobin A1C, which is like the 3-month report card for diabetes. So that's their average sugars over the last 3 months. I'll do a highly sensitive C-reactive protein. I'll do a vitamin D. I'll do a ferritin. But let's go back to highly sensitive C-reactive protein. So the key to remember the words we're saying right now, and you might want to type this in, is HSCRP is not the same as CRP. So CRP stands for C-reactive protein. So proteins are molecules that float throughout your blood, and they respond to your system. Like if I would come over and we were do a workout and you get a big bruise on your arm, that bruise causes a reaction. Your body has to repair it. And so it is a reactive proteins that come in and fight that. And so you can see things like if your body is fighting a cancer, we know that something called your SED rate, which is a sedimentation rate, which means I take your blood and I watch to see how long does it take for the red blood cells to sink to the bottom. And if there's lots of these proteins in the way, if there's lots of that reactive proteins hanging out in your blood, it just takes a long time for those cells to settle. If you don't have any of them, they settle pretty quick, under a minute. If they take over an hour, you're like, something is wrong. Something is wrong. And when people have cancer, they have lots of these reactive proteins in there. So one of those, like, it's like a poor man's test. SED rates are really cheap. So you can just pay somebody to, how long does it, it's a timer and blood. It's not really hard, but it doesn't really point you in a specific direction. So then we started looking at different kinds of proteins that show up in different cancers and different places in the body and different inflammatory diseases. And when we first came out with C-reactive protein, there's this class of proteins that this was called the class C. And we think it is linked to circulation. So C-reactive protein, if you were going to that workout and you got that big bruise, your C-reactive protein would go up. But your highly sensitive C-reactive protein wouldn't. Highly sensitive C-reactive protein came out a few years later. And highly sensitive C-reactive protein was another like subset of the C-reactive proteins. And if you can imagine looking down the tunnel of a blood vessel, there's actually a little bitty skin lining inside the arteries, this endothelial layer. And that highly sensitive C-reactive protein comes from that endothelial lining. And so if we can keep it under 1, we know that the little tickle that happens on the inside of blood vessels that is related to hardening of the arteries, that calcium that my dad has definitely had a highly sensitive C-reactive protein that was off the charts for years. That endothelial lining is being tickled. That protein is being released from the inside part of the blood vessels. And it's very specific to the tunnels of your body, the arteries of your body. And when we can keep it below 1, I can have a strong level of confidence that your arteries are not inflamed. They are not doing things I don't want them to do. I'm not going to chase that. Your highly sensitive C-reactive protein is low. And if I want to see it go up, I'll tell you to go smoke a bunch of cigarettes. Cigarettes, incredibly inflammatory to the insides of your blood vessels. And it's one of the ways we can see the link to tobacco smoking and heart disease. Diabetics does the same thing. The longer those sugars are higher, that more that endothelial lining gets inflamed and up goes their highly sensitive C-reactive protein. If it goes between 1 and 3, then we're starting to get a little twitchy, like, yeah, we'd like that to be down. Okay. For every,
oh my God,
I know yours was 10.
Did you hear her? Mine is 10.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw it like the day of the funeral. I'm like, oh, this is going to take a while to explain this. Or maybe it was the day after the funeral. But the key thing there is we don't have a trajectory. We don't have any previous numbers. And so I'm telling you that with a sense of don't panic. This is one marker. It is very sensitive to the insides of that. I mean, that's highly sensitive, but it's believable. Like, it's not one of those ones like, oh, test it again. Sometimes things just go wrong. Yeah. If you had just had a surgery, if you had just broken your leg, then I would say, all right, test it again. But if nothing goofy has gone on, like if you had a rip-roaring skin burn, like not a sunburn like your daughter just had, a skin burn, then I'd say, no. That's something, that you've got inflammatory markers off the charts. Don't do that. Barring none of that, and I don't have a sense of any of those histories, anything extreme in the last 2 weeks, but it was 2 months ago. Do you remember anything going on 2 months ago?
Yeah, I had just traveled. I had just come back from, I don't remember where I went, but I traveled for a conference, and it was the next day that I went to go get those. So if travel has anything to do with it, then
I don't think I can give travel that much credit. If you traveled and you broke your leg, then we can have somebody to blame. But if you didn't do that, then so here's the deal. I have seen that number in the 30s, and then but I have, and we have gotten it down. I mean, it is a place where if there was somebody who I would say, okay, you know how I said I take K2, I'd put you on K2. And I know we weren't going to talk about that tonight, but vitamin D, fat soluble vitamin, and you can get it in good foods. And the longer you're ketogenic, the better it's going to look. What was your vitamin D, by the way?
It was like 57.
Yeah, I thought I had it checked off as very good. Like, no, she's good, which is why your cholesterol was also a little. Those particles were a little higher too. They were not terrible. Do not look at terrible at those. They're higher than they could be, but don't worry about that. The highly sensitive C-reactive protein was the only thing that I put in my head as saying, oh, if she didn't catch that, I need to make sure I talk to her about it. Yeah. And it is very much related to, you've seen me show that part about metabolic syndrome and how important it is to get to ideal body weight. And once they do get that ideal body weight and you say, oh, but I'm so much better than I was. And my husband likes the curves and, you know, I'm doing great. I feel good. Do I really need to get to that ideal? Yes. And especially if you have a highly sensitive C-reactive protein of 10.
So Karen Menson knows me very well because she just said, hey, when did you have that bad sinus infection though? So I deal with sinus problems all the time. In fact, the molds are high here in Texas today, and I was literally dying earlier when I went outside. So I don't know if that's going to have anything to do with the high reactive protein.
Yeah, I'd have a tough time giving it much credit. You know, maybe a half a point would be worth looking at. But it's something where I would set the calendar for 6 months, and I would do two things in the meantime. I would be taking K2, that D3 K2. Okay. If you have D3 already, the next time you buy your D3, it's not urgent. You're not going to but if you empty out your D3 and you go to replace the bottle, I'd put D3 K2. That's in my cupboard. There are a few things in my cupboard.
So even though I'm good on my D3, you still want me to take it?
Yeah, well, that's a good point, actually. You don't really need the D3, do you? Your numbers are good. Yeah. And have you been really taking it a lot, or is that just in the cupboard?
No, it's been in the cupboard. I'm not really good at taking any medicines. I'll be quite honest. I hate
be imprinting from you.
Yo, I'm serious. I can't stand to pop a pill. I would rather get things naturally. I struggle with doing that. Yeah. Right.
Well, and that's fair because I'm that way too. I prescribe them all day long, but I rarely take them. But the K2 is something that, especially if you've ever had a chapter where you've been overweight, if you have a highly sensitive C-reactive protein, it just says we do not want calcium going into that endothelial lining in your arteries. Now, how could I prove that was happening or not? You could go in and get a calcium artery scan, a CAC, coronary artery calcium scan. You've heard about that? It's an X-ray, essentially, a really fast, incredibly fat, not X-ray, it's a CAT scan of your heart, and it looks at the calcium in the lining of your coronary arteries. And if you've got a 0, that means there's no calcium in your arteries today. And if you've got a 100, you're starting to have a risk. If you're above 400, you've got a lot of risk. I had a patient in the last year who had one at 2,500. I'm like, don't fart. I don't know what to do with 2,500 on a calcium. Artery. Like, I think my dad's with the calcium I can see on the X-ray would probably be over 1,000 for sure. So we have a belief, and there's been some early studies that you can reverse the calcium in these arteries with low inflammation. And so that highly sensitive C-reactive protein, again, it's one of the proteins for inflammation. And so we want to check it. We want to follow this in you. I would probably put this above checking an A1C. If I had to, choose what's the most important place to put the money and the resources for checking labs, checking a highly sensitive C-reactive protein, and I would do it with increments of weight. I would say, all right, wherever your weight is now, I would check it at 15 pounds from now. And to see if you make a difference.
Okay, so for those of us who need to take K2, is it liquid form? How much should we take? Should we take the MK7 version of K? See a lot of questions about it.
So again, this is a really nice detailed topic that I've tried to decide if I should put this in my next book or not. But you could write a whole book just on this because it's really complicated. But the K7, the MK7 is a subset of K2, and it seems to be much more linked to prevention of the heart disease. I don't think it's been studied well enough to say if you take the M7, then usually they've taken out the other ones. And so there's an MK14, I think was the other one. So make sure the 7 is in your supplement, but to say it's the only one necessary, I'm not ready to jump on that bandwagon after what I was reading. Like, it's a good one, but we don't have really good studies saying that that's the only one you should take. Fermented foods, keep them on the list though. That's actually where I learned how to make fermented vegetables. I tried last summer after reading about K2. Unfortunately,
really,
yeah, they sat in my fridge fermenting all winter. I didn't eat them. I'm like, and my kids were like, "Is this one of your experiments?" I'm like, "Shut up." I think you can throw away.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. The vitamin D talk was very, very interesting. Gosh, I've learned a lot already. I hope you guys have too. If you don't know what your vitamin D level is, I highly suggest you check it out. Also, Dr. Boz has a book, Any Way You Can. And she talks about everything that we talk about on these lives is already in the book. So do yourself a favor, grab it. We've linked it down in the comment section. She has it on Audible, so you can listen to it in your car, which is what I did. Or you can order the hard copy of the book and sit out in the sun and get your vitamin D while you're doing it. And if you have, and yes, Dr. Boz, when I look at your book on Amazon, the book that was bought together the most was the Keto Friendly Recipes book with your book. Like, isn't that awesome? The perfect? I did too. Because you're getting the science for keto. You're understanding why it works with the science behind it. And then you're getting some freaking good recipes on how to stay keto.
How do you make it real?
And live. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I'm sorry I was so blurry, guys. I don't know what's wrong with my internet. I'll have to figure it out. But thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next Sunday. Have a good evening.
Please subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos. Stay tuned.